From Tally to Cali,
It's time
to wake up.
Wake up!
Warchant.com is your ultimate Seminole sports source.
and this is Wake Up Warchant, presented by
The vitamins.
Energy.
Now here's Warchant.com's Aslan Hutchavandi.
and Corey Clark.
Wake up! It's Wake Up Warchant presented by Vitamin Energy. Coming up on today's show, 54 days until kickoff. But hating your rivals, that's a 365-day job. Let's find out what's going on in Gainesville and Coral Gables as we inch closer to preseason camp. Wake Up Warchant will be presented in limited commercial interruption form all week long, courtesy of our awesome friends over at Vitamin Energy. VitaminEnergy.com. Shake it and take it. You know what it's all about. It's a little bitty bottle with a big old punch. 260 milligrams, all natural caffeine. That means the absorption consistent, steady, impactful throughout your day. 7 hours of energy. Probably more, to be honest with you, because 260 milligrams of all natural caffeine is aggressive. But that's what we need, everybody. No sugar crash. Shake it and take it. VitaminEnergy.com. Shout out to our friends over at Corner Pocket Bar and Grill, cptallybar.com, 2475 Appalachia Parkway. Tuesday, trivia night. Thursday, bingo night. Every day of the week. Delicious food, ice cold drinks, 40 televisions. It's the unofficial, official sports bar of the Warchant.com family. Check it out, Corner Pocket Bar and Grill. All right, so off the rip, I'm not here right now. I'm away on vacation with my lady. So instead of just leaving a week of dead air, and then you guys would forget about us and then never listen to us again, that would hurt my feelings greatly. We decided to do some shows, little big picture evergreen stuff that won't be too stale. So if you're here for the news of the day, just know that this was recorded days in advance. So check out warchant.com, which also leverages all the power of the rivals.com network now. It's on 3, it's Rivals. It's on 3 Rivals. So we're going to talk about Miami and Florida. We're going to kind of get some insight on what's going on in those programs, expectations, what their roster looks like, give you guys kind of an idea of how, I guess, Florida State's obviously going to match up with them. Wednesday, the plan is to talk about Clemson. Corey caught up with Larry Williams over at Tiger Illustrated. They're the Clemson website that used to be on Rivals, but they're now on 3. And then Friday, we're going to talk Bama with Charlie Potter of Bama Online. That used to be 247. It is now on 3. So you get the drift of what's going on out there in the marketplace. Everybody come on home. So that's what this week is going to look like. I still think Seminole Headlines is going to go down on Tuesday, so bookmark that. Don't forget the Jeff Cameron Show, 1 to 4 o'clock, warchant.com, around the clock. Let's start with the Gators. I don't know if you guys are ready for Matt Shodell this early in the morning. We'll give you a little bit of a warm-up. We caught up with Zach Abolverdi. I think that's how you pronounce it. That was a little much. But Zach has been covering the Gators for a long time, and we got the lowdown on the Gators. Billy Napier, DJ Lagway. Is he healthy? Is he not healthy? Let's find out. All right, then, Zach, let's kind of get right to it. Billy Napier's entering year 4. There's a litany of things that you can insulate yourself as a coach with. But is it finally kind of like time? Do Florida fans think that he's had enough time to get this roster built and they'll have a really good idea of what kind of coach he is, what kind of program builder he is this season?
100%. I mean, you look at where this roster is at. These are his players, number one, for the majority. I think there's only 5 holdovers from the previous staff. And this team, 2 deep wise, is probably the best set that he's ever had. Now, obviously, the schedule is brutal once again, but you've got the pieces that you need, particularly at quarterback, to really be able to do something this year and challenge. Not only in the SEC, but I think that a lot of Florida fans would like to see Florida contend for a playoff spot now that it's expanded to 12 teams. So this is a critical year for Billy.
How did this all kind of come together? I mean, looking at some of these recruiting classes, I mean, his first year, which you really don't count 23 with not having a full, or actually 23 was his first time with a full kind of class, 13th, 10th, and 10th. He's had high school class. And I know a lot of those guys actually ended up transferring out, but still seems like he's got a pretty solid base of development that he's in. How would you kind of maybe grade his development or evaluation? And how much does that kind of lead to the expectations for the team this season?
Yeah, at least the expectations, but it's also, I think, been the reason for part of their turnaround. Not only last season, but just the feeling like they're trending in the right direction as a program. They've hit on some high school recruits, but I would also say that their portal players that they've landed, they've gotten some impact guys. Florida's maybe not signed the top 5, top 10 portal class in terms of where it ranks nationally. But they've hit on some important players. Obviously, the one of the guys that stands out from that first year was Osiris Torrance, but a lot of other guys since then that they've brought in, the Elijah Badgers, Shamir DK, Caleb Banks, who's still on the team this year. I mean, they've hit with some of their portal acquisitions, and that's kind of helped them catch up and improve the roster, and certainly some of their high school players as well. They've gotten their fair share of in-state targets and then national guys that they've prioritized. You're not going to get them all, obviously, but they've won some of those key recruiting battles. They just won another one yesterday where they went head-to-head with Texas for the D lineman that they landed. But, the Jaden Baws of the world, the DJ Lagways, the LJ McCrays, like they've gotten to the thick of some big-time recruitments, Dallas Wilson, and prevailed. And those are some of the pieces right there that I just mentioned that are why this roster is in a much better place.
It's wild though. I used to know the entire Gator roster inside and out because I was so much about knowing what Florida State was going to have to deal with at the end of the season every year. But I've, focused so much more on Florida State that I haven't been able to kind of keep up with what Florida's brought in. But like a lot of the standout names that I see on these preseason lists, these are 3-star guys out of high school, guys like George Gums and Caleb Banks. I mean, is that a decent part of this turnaround, is the fact that they were able to hit on these diamonds in the rough, these 3 stars?
You mentioned Gums, like he is probably their best portal get in terms of a guy that they got and it just has completely exceeded expectations, and certainly was somewhat of a sleeper coming out of the transfer portal. Like, this is a guy who played tight end at Northern Illinois and just had transferred to the defensive side of the ball. Now he's Florida's starting jack outside linebacker. And he's a guy that finished second on the team last year in sacks and tackles for loss. He's going to have an even bigger role this year. And the guy looks like $1 million when you see him in person. I mean, he's been one of the guys that we've heard that's kind of been killing it in summer workouts, which is not to be surprising. But you're right. I mean, it's guys like Caleb Banks, some of the players that they just got drafted. Cam Jackson as well was another really good get that they got out of the portal. And Shamir DK, I mean, he's probably one of the better results that they've got from transfer portal recruiting. I mean, listen, I was in the building. I was fortunate enough that day to do an embed and be in there on signing day when they got Shamir DK. And I'll say it, I broke the news. And Florida fans were not happy about it. Like, they crushed it in our message board. It kind of got crushed online. Like, it was not a guy that people were excited about. He ended up being one of their best receivers that they've had in the last several years. So those type of results, Ricky Pearsall as well. Some of those guys were bigger names coming out of the portal. Some of them were not.
Well, he's been able to get a quarterback, which, helps a lot. Gives you some breathing room when things are pretty rocky in the middle of a treacherous schedule.
Yeah.
Where is DJ Lagway? To my understanding, so Lagway did not participate in spring. Is he going to
not a throw?
Did not throw. Not a single throw. All right.
Not a throw. We were watching.
So what is the level of optimism, concern around his availability for the team this season?
Man, I think that you would have to say cautiously optimistic, just because he has resumed throwing. They're saying all the right things, and it looks like, based off what we've heard, we don't know the official injury, but they do feel like within his camp and within the program, this is something that he can recover from. But at the same time, you got to still in the back of your mind be concerned a little bit about the fact that he didn't throw in the spring, which was a key time for him coming off of his first year to kind of develop his game to the next level, expand more of the playbook. And yes, he can do all that in fall camp, but he's going to be knocking off some rust as well and trying to build chemistry with the receivers. And I think probably most importantly, making sure that his shoulder is holding up and that it's not flaring up at all, not having any issues, not giving him any pain or discomfort, and really that's when we're going to find out where this thing is trending, where it's at, in my opinion. And we wrote that at Gators Online, really in our war room this week. But I think that all the things that we've seen this summer are good and positive. He hasn't had a hiccup in his recovery or a setback. He is throwing the ball again. But until he actually gets out there in a practice setting and he's out there doing it in practice after practice and in a scrimmage setting, that's when I think everybody can breathe a sigh of relief.
How much of Lagway's greatness, Zach, is it his physical tools, his physical skills, what he can do as an actual quarterback? How much of it is off the field, intangible stuff that maybe we don't see and read about on a usual basis?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I think he excels in both of those areas. From a talent standpoint, his arm and what he can do with the deep throws and his ability in the pocket and to read defenses and to just recognize coverages at his level is pretty special. And obviously some of the passes that he completed, his deep ball accuracy, how he graded out with those deep passes, I mean, that's about as good as it gets. And that excited a lot of Florida fans to see that potential. I think he's only going to get better with that. He's still a young guy at the same time. And then off the field, though, I do think that he has an edge to him, and there's some competitiveness. He's what you would call a gamer. Like when the lights come on and when he gets out there and crosses those white lines, like he competes and he thrives in that moment. And, he showed that obviously last year, leading them on a 4-game winning streak, but most importantly, playing with a hamstring injury that was not 100%. And that's where I go back to his arm talent and what he was able to do with basically being immobile, especially that LSU game. I mean, guy could barely move. And some of the throws that he was able to complete, and then just the poise that it took to be able to make it through those games and beat those opponents. So he's got it all. That's why there's so much hype and excitement about him. And then, the best thing about it is you meet the kid and he's just this like humble, like, doesn't think he's the best thing in the world, doesn't come across in an arrogant way whatsoever. And that's just what you love from a quarterback.
But confident, though, I bet.
Confident, yeah, 100%. And he's a guy that's also very involved in the community. Like he's had the event that he just had this past offseason at Spurrier's, donating to all the women's sports teams at UF. He just had an event in his hometown of Texas as well. So he's not just, all about football. And he is, and I've said this before and it's not a surprise, but like he is Florida's most important and revered quarterback since Tim Tebow. There's no way around it. Like there is not a guy that came in with this much hype since Tim. I mean, the guy had a Gatorade commercial, was in a Gatorade commercial before he even played it down at Florida. The only thing that compares with that is Tim Tebow. And then how much he means to the program and its potential trajectory is also very similar to Tebow as well.
All right, well, who's he going to throw the ball to? DK's in the league. Badger's gone. Eugene Wilson hurt his hip. I don't know the severity of that, but whenever I hear about hip injury, I'm like, well, that's not a really quick turnaround. I know he got injured in the season last year, in the middle of the last year, but what's the receiving options kind of look like? How would you grade that?
Yeah, surprisingly, there's a lot of excitement and buzz about the receiver room, despite losing Badger and DK. You would think losing receivers of that production would kind of have you worried. But Wilson coming back, and by all accounts, they feel really good about how his hip was repaired and what he's going to be able to do this year, where he's expected to play more in the slot, which is going to be exciting because he'll kind of replace that Shamir DK role. But J. Michael Sturdivant from UCLA, he was one of their biggest acquisitions from the portal this offseason. He was a guy that they beat Georgia for. Kirby Smart really wanted to add this guy to their receiver room. And he's kind of a bigger body receiver, deep threat that will replace Badger at that X position. So they've kind of got that figured out. But really what makes the room probably the most exciting is the freshmen that have come in. Dallas Wilson, who I mentioned earlier, Vernell Brown III, and Nashawn Montgomery too. All three of those guys enrolled early. All three of them impressed in the spring game. All three of them are going to play as true freshmen and be in the rotation. In fact, Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown, if they don't start, they're going to play starter-like reps at some point or another. Especially, I mean, there was a lot of excitement about Dallas Wilson. I mean, he went absolutely off in that spring game, and I know it was a spring game, but there's a reason why he was a 5-star and so coveted as a recruit. So you're asking a lot of some new pieces. They also have some guys returning too, like Khalil Jackson, who's coming off of a torn ACL from week 1. So that was, he should be in a place where he's ready to play. And Aiden Mizell is another guy that they expect to really take a jump. He'll probably be a starter this year. So those are the names to watch for. Tank Hawkins is a sophomore that could emerge as well. So they got some options, but they do have a lot of production to replace.
They got a pretty good running back, even though they lost Montrell Johnson. Jaden Baugh, I think, ends up finishing like top 10 in the SEC in yards per rush. Just with him, Jake Slaughter anchoring that offensive line. Offensive line is such an important thing. Being able to run the ball seems like on the surface, Florida's probably going to be able to run the ball when they have to. Yeah,
their running back room is not only the best on the team, but it's probably the best in the SEC. And I know Cole Kublik is one guy that has them rated that way. This offseason he put Florida as the number one running back room in the SEC. And I tell you what, it starts with Jaden Baugh. There's no doubt about it. I mean, what he was able to do as a true freshman, tying the school record in that first game that he got to start against Kentucky, 5 rushing touchdowns. It was also his first career 100-yard game. He had a huge performance against LSU. He is clearly the guy. But it's a 1-2 punch with Jacoby Jackson now. Pensacola's own. He's another great find by this staff, and he wasn't even out of the portal. He's a JUCO running back, kind of came out of nowhere, showed up on campus, was very overweight. I'll be honest, was probably a guy that we had as a potential transfer candidate. And then all of a sudden last year, he kind of emerged after some injuries at the running back position. And then this offseason, he has become one of the guys. Like he is the leader of their running back room. He's the only senior in the room. Montrell Johnson's gone. Jaden Baugh is just a sophomore. Jacoby Jackson is the leader of that group. And he also has become a leader on the team as well. Like he's one of the guys that sets the tone in the locker room. He's one of the vocal guys. He's one of the alpha dogs. So he's as much of their rushing attack and how good they can be as Jaden Baugh. And if you go back and look at the games that they had last year, once Johnson was out, they used both of them. I mean, they both had 19 carries against Texas in their bowl game. I think that Baugh had 17 carries and Jackson had 14. And that's kind of how they used them when it was just the two of them. So they are a good pairing. But then you also got a guy in Katie Daniels who came in with Jaden Baugh, and honestly, initially was probably the guy that fans were maybe more excited for than Baugh, because Baugh was kind of like this late addition. He was a big get, but Katie Daniels was a guy that folks were excited about, and he got hurt last year and was banged up for most of the season until the bowl game, and he had a great touchdown run. And then their other running back, Trayon Webb, who was actually the number 2 back to start the season, he had a season-ending injury and then just completely got passed on the depth chart by Baugh and Jacoby Jackson. He's still on the team. He's still in the backfield, but he didn't play in the spring, and that allowed Katie Daniels to really make his case to be that number 3 running back, because they will use a third back. So their room is in a really good place. They got Byron Lewis as well, who they just added this summer. So Jabbar Jalouk has been one of the better assistants on the staff in terms of obviously production on the field, but also recruiting trail too. He's killing it.
Defensively, I guess big picture, Ron Roberts, second season now, retained to be defensive coordinator. It seems like on the surface, edge rushers, pass rush, something that Florida is going to be strong with. The interior of the defensive line, maybe not as much. And then I don't know how the back end is kind of shaping up for the Gators.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think Roberts being back is important just because they feel like they figured it out on defense at the end of the year. And, him moving up to the box halfway through the season or 4 games into the season really changed the complexion of how he called plays. And I just think they got into a good rhythm and he got a good feel for the personnel. And a lot of it is back. I mentioned Caleb Banks, Tyreek Sapp, George Gums, and then they lost Shamar James, but they got a really strong linebacker room still with Pup Howard, Jaden Robinson, Miles Graham, Aaron Childs. So their front 7 is very good. LJ McCray is also part of that edge position, Cameron James. Their secondary has some more question marks. A lot of it has to do with injuries. Aaron Gates, to me, is not just probably their best player in the secondary, but one of their best players on defense. And he tore his ACL, actually, I think he might have had more than a torn ACL. I'm not exactly sure on that, but it was a severe knee injury. And however, he's already had a torn ACL before and was crazy in his recovery from it. It was something that was talked about and the staff loved because it was something he dealt with in high school. And apparently he's done the same thing again, and he's way ahead of schedule. There was some thought that he would not be ready for the start of the season when the injury happened. Now there's a chance that he will be. So that's a huge question mark. Now the good thing is, the positive is, if he's not ready, you got Sharif Denson. Both of those guys played their star nickel position. But at the corner spot is really where the question marks are. They returned both of their starting safeties, Jordan Castell and Bryce Thornton, but they lost Jason Marshall Jr. And then Devin Moore is coming off of a season-ending injury last year. You got Dijon Johnson got into some trouble in the offseason. If he does get a suspension, I don't anticipate it would be more than the first game, if even that happens. But there is a good competition there for that second cornerback spot between him, Dijon, and Cormani McClain. The former 5-star, obviously a name that rings bells in the state of Florida. Florida got him over from Colorado last year, and he's still redshirted, but was able to see the field, had a breakout game against Kentucky when Jason Marshall went down with that season-ending injury, and got a chance to start in the Texas game before he himself had a season-ending injury, and he hurt his wrist. So that's kind of where their secondary stands. So they like the guys that they have, but there is some guys coming off of injuries and just they got to stay healthy because they don't have – I want to say they have depth in the secondary, but there's a lot of young guys. So they can't really afford to have guys go down in the fashion that they did last year, because they were dropping like flies in the secondary in 2024, and that can't be a repeat thing.
All right, last thing on the way out, Zach. You mentioned this schedule. It's up on the screen for the folks that are watching on YouTube. 2-0 start most likely with Long Island University and USF, although USF, who knows, that could be a little bit of a game opponent, but you've got to go to Death Valley. You got to go to the original Death Valley. I don't know, the second Death Valley, the one down there in Baton Rouge, at Miami, and then Texas. Although you do have a bye week sandwich between Miami and Texas. The ending 4 games, my gosh, or 5 games really. You play Georgia, then you got to go to Lexington, to Oxford, host Tennessee, host Florida State. What's the number? In Tallahassee, it feels like 8. If Mike Norvell can get to 8 wins, probably lives to see another year. People can squint their eyes and imagine, okay, 2026 might be the year if they can blah, 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 blah. What do you think the number is for Billy to hold on to his job and keep these fans engaged?
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that he would lose his job if he only won 8 games, but I think 9 is the number that he needs to get to your point, keep fans engaged, keep people feeling like the program is headed in the right direction. And let's be honest, potentially, if you win 9 games with that schedule, you could potentially be a playoff team. Now, if you're not, you're still going to be a top 25 team, especially if you win 9 games, that means you're only losing 3 games on that schedule. And look at some of those teams, and depending on who those losses are and when they happen, Florida could be sitting pretty at the end of the year if they don't take a loss to some of their rivals like your Seminoles or the or the Volunteers, which are going to be – that's crazy. I feel like I'm in 2001 again seeing those games on the schedule like that.
Right.
But, yeah, I think 9 wins is – because they got to 8 obviously last year, but it was 7 in the regular season. So technically if they got to 8 and won their bowl game, it would still be, incremental improvement. But I think with this team, with this quarterback, with this roster, fans want to see Florida compete in the SEC and contend for a college football playoff spot. And to do that, I think they got to get to 9 games.
There we go. If you want to know more about the Gators, which you probably don't, it's the Florida State podcast, Zach. They're probably sick of this. Sorry, everybody. We had to do something while I was on vacation. Zach's great work. Also, Keith Niebuhr over on Gators Online. They're part of the On3 network. You guys call him Zach Abolverdi. I call him Zach Abolverdi.
That's right. That's,
everybody.
That's that Persian pronunciation, baby.
That's right. That's right. Zach, thanks for doing this, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on, bud.
We got Matt Shodell, every Florida State fan's favorite Miami reporter. Comes from Canesport.com. Matt's been doing this for a long, long time, man. We appreciate it. So this might be a tradition now, Matt. Like I'm going to try to go on vacation every summer, and we'll catch up at some point and kind of preview some stuff with Miami, Florida State. So I appreciate you taking time out, man. How's life down there in South Florida?
Did the Florida State fans have a favorite Miami reporter? Is that like a thing? I don't really think so. But yeah, life is it's going, man. We've been doing a lot of previews, and actually, I just started working on our Florida State preview. I think you guys are the most unpredictable team in terms of trying to predict how your record's going to be. But I guess I'm not here to predict FSU. I'm here to predict Miami. So
yeah, everyone wants to talk about the quarterback. We'll wait on that for a minute. It seems impressive what Mario's been able to do on the front line. This offensive line seems like it's going to be really formidable again. And as Cooper returns, Matthew McCoy returns, Francis Maui-Noah returns. They went and got another center. It just feels like this is going to be his thing. He's going to find the best center in the portal and bring him in every single year. They've got all sorts of high accolades. Any reason to think that maybe they won't live up to the hype, or is everybody around this program really excited about what Florida, or rather Miami's going to be up on their offensive line?
Yeah, the offensive line is going to be the strength. It's something maybe Florida State could have used last year. But they have 6 players who have started games that are returning. And Francis Maui-Noah is projected a first-round draft pick, and as Cooper has twice been all ACC honorable mention. He's supposed to be taking the next step up as the right guard. The center, they got James Brockermeyer from TCU. He allowed 1 sack and like 609 reps there, and they played a couple of decent teams. And they also have back Markel Bell, who's 6'9", 320 pounds, looks like an NFL left tackle. A little slow on his feet. He says he's gotten better. So if he answers the bell, they're going to be fine. And then the left guard is the competition, because Ryan Rodriguez beat out Matthew McCoy last fall, then got hurt in the first game against Florida, never came back. So that's the question. Matthew McCoy was okay. He wasn't great. He wasn't terrible. So if Ryan Rodriguez wins that battle, that's a good sign. That means he's better than Matthew McCoy. So yeah, I think the offensive line is definitely the strength for Miami. And as a matter of fact, every single returning starter on Miami's entire offense is on the offensive line. There's not a single returning starter anywhere else on the entire offense.
Is Markel Bell, is he the other tackle? Obviously, Maui-Noah's got one of this, so it's going to become down to Markel Bell. He was a JUCO guy from Mississippi.
Right. Highly regarded JUCO guy. Started last year when Jalen Rivers got hurt. And then when Jalen came back, he had done so well that they started putting Jalen at guard, especially in running situations, because that's Markel's strength. He just moves people. But again, not that fast on his feet, so it's a little iffy in terms of his pass protection, which is maybe, against elite pass rushers at defensive end, he's going to struggle against those guys based on what I saw last year and even a little bit this spring, unless he's made strides this offseason. So we'll see when he shows back up in fall camp.
Running back, I really like Shamar Brown from North Dakota State. I know he showed up late. He was a post-spring transfer addition. Jordan Lyle comes back. Damian Martinez leaves. Probably pretty good 1-2 punch. Definitely by ACC standards, it seems like.
Yeah, it's going to be Fletcher and Lyle. Shamar Brown is the power back. Mario loves these big, strong backs. He likes to just punish people and beat people up. That's his thing. So Charmar Brown certainly fits that, but I don't think Charmar Brown's going to be anything more than a number 3 back. I don't anticipate him having a big role.
He ran for like 2,000 yards in North Dakota State.
I know, yeah. The key words there are North Dakota State. Okay. The guy's not going to speed by anybody. He's a guy who's going to get you 3-4 yards a carry, and he will move defensive linemen backwards and keep his legs churning. And they've had so many problems with short yardage backs that paying a guy a little bit of NIL money to make sure you don't have a third down problem, I mean, that's invaluable, right? How many 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1s, especially with Mario, 4th and 2s does he go for where he runs the ball up the middle? And you know they're going to run up the middle every freaking time because that's the complaint of Miami fans. And now we finally got a guy who can run up the middle and do a refrigerator Perry for the old school people imitation. He's not 400 pounds, okay, but he's a big guy. And just move people backwards and get your 2 yards. So that's sort of what he's brought in to do. And yeah, Fletcher's excellent. Jordan Lyle's actually the superstar, but he was a true freshman last year. He actually may wind up starting at some point this year. I mean, Fletcher's really good, but Fletcher's slower compared to Jordan Lyle. Jordan Lyle's got it all. You know, when you look at him as a freshman and going back a while, I actually covered Frank Gore as a freshman, and Frank Gore averaged, I think, 8-9 yards a carry as a freshman. Jordan Lyle averaged 7.4 yards a carry as a freshman. And not to compare him to a Hall of Famer, okay? But he has that speed, that vision, the quickness, and the power. It's a combination of those 4 that you don't see often in running backs. So people might be sleeping on Jordan Lyle and looking at Mark Fletcher, but I think Lyle's the best back on the roster.
All right. Out wide, Restrepo gone, Isaiah Horton gone.
Do you have to say it like that? Do you have to say gone? Just say gone. It's no big deal. No big deal.
But to be noted that Miami is very active in the portal in the spring window. I think there was at least 2 guys that we have a pretty good idea Florida State was very interested in, and Tony Johnson from Cincinnati, and then the Marion kid from BYU. What was his name there, Aslan? Keelan.
Keelan, yep.
Know your stuff, Aslan. So these obviously were guys that Florida State was in the mix for. Miami goes and adds these guys after spring. Do you think they felt underwhelmed by guys like JoJo Trader? I mean, I know he was a true freshman. Feels like the future would be bright for a guy like that, but what does it mean? Did it mean anything that Miami got really active in the portal at wide receiver? What's that position look like?
Yeah, Miami lost their top 5 statistical receivers, including a tight end, Elijah Arroyo. And this is the question mark area, the weak area, whatever you want to call it, you know, the to be determined area, because JoJo Trader is going to start. He's probably their best, most talented receiver, but he had 75 receiving yards last year as a freshman, you know, was banged up a lot of the year. So it sort of reeks of desperation when you're taking guys that are probably going to start in Tony Johnson, Keelan Marion, and CJ Daniels. I think 2 of those 3 guys will wind up starting, probably Johnson in the slot, and probably Marion outside over CJ. CJ didn't look that good this spring, although he was coming off injury. So we'll see on that because they're going to be battling it out in the fall. And Miami does have some really good true freshmen, also led by Malachi Toney, but starting true freshmen is not the easiest thing in the world. So with that said, yeah, you know, Tony Johnson, Keelan Marion, they're going to be amazing if you ask Miami fans. That's what I'm going to tell you. Miami fans will be like, oh my gosh, the receiver's fixed, right? These guys have been veterans. They've played for 3 or 4 years already in college. They've never had 500 yards receiving in a season, okay? So I'm not sitting here like, you know, Miami fans hate me. Maybe that's why FSU fans have me as their favorite reporter, if that's a real thing. I don't think it is. Because I tell the truth. Miami's receiver position is a major, major question mark. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, yeah, you know, these receivers are going to be fine. They're not going to be fine. We don't know until we see them play Notre Dame's really, really good secondary. And we'll get a better idea in Game 4 because Florida's got some decent players in the secondary. You guys, I was looking at your secondary, actually, and you got a lot of holes to fill, you know, in the back end there. You lost a couple of really good guys.
Yeah. All right. So without further ado, then quarterback Carson Beck obviously comes from Georgia, injures himself in the SEC championship game, says that he's going to go into the NFL draft, enters last season as the presumptive number 1 overall pick, gets injured in the SEC championship game, decides to enter the NFL draft nonetheless, but ends up changing his mind, comes to Miami. UCL injury was particularly, that's the specific injury that he sustained, Matt. I've read some stuff from Mario, I think earlier in the month of June about, you know, he was able to kind of run and do some of the more mental things in spring. And it seems like when they do these player run practices, I don't know if he's going to be able to let it loose completely, but it sounds like he'll be throwing the ball pretty soon, if not already. What have you been hearing about Carson Beck's availability and what they think his readiness will be when you guys take on Notre Dame?
Well, let's start at the beginning. When people hear Tommy John surgery, they think he'll be out 9 months, he'll be out a year. This was a hybrid surgery done by a surgeon who sort of invented it out in California, and he's done it with pro athletes.
Neil Diattaché or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the guy. Yep. It's a mesh surgery, and it just takes a few months before you're sort of back rehabbing and all this other stuff. So he's already throwing. From everything I've heard, he looks good this summer, and he's going to be fine for the fall. Now, they'll probably know in Mario, they'll limit him in the first couple of weeks of fall practice. I mean, what's the hurry, right? I mean, he knows what he's doing. He's ultra talented. He was the Heisman Trophy front runner at this time a year ago. Okay, he was. You can look it up. And the only reason he's not even on the radar now is A, people only remember what have you done for me lately, which he missed the spring. He missed the playoffs, most of it. And on top of that, he led the SEC in interceptions. But if you sort of dive into it, he had the most yardage lost in drops by his receivers, as noted by Pro Football Focus, for Power 4 programs. And on top of that, the offensive line at Georgia shockingly wasn't that good last year. And the running game shockingly wasn't that good last year. So really, he was trying to do everything himself. His top two guys, Bowers and McConkey from the year before when he was amazing, right? And that's why he was the Heisman frontrunner. They were gone, and guys were dropping the ball. So he had nobody helping him. And for anyone who knows college football, the quarterback should be able to do it all by himself, right? Isn't that how it works? You don't need anybody else on your team. Apparently you do. So now the question becomes, well, at Miami, does he actually have the receivers? Because that's what I just said a minute ago is the question mark, right? If the receivers aren't good enough, aren't getting spacing, aren't able to make big plays, are averaging barely any yards after the catch, he might struggle, okay? And we saw last year when things weren't going his way, he threw the ball into traffic. Georgia fans were happy to see him leave. There's a reason for it, okay? And Miami fans have seen that before too, right? Because Tyler Van Dyke was great one year, ACC, Offensive Rookie of the Year, whatever it was, and then terrible the next year. So what Miami fans do not want to see is a repeat of what Carson Beck did at Georgia last year in terms of throwing the ball into traffic, throwing the ball up for grabs. He has to be a game manager in this offense. And if you have a good offensive line and good running backs and good enough receivers, he should have a top 10 quarterback in the country type season because he has all that in place if the receivers are actually decent.
All right. Let's flip the defense then, Matt. Up front, obviously new defensive coordinator. Corey Heatherton comes in from, I don't know if that's the way he pronounced his last name.
Heatherman, yeah.
Heatherman, thank you. Comes in from Minnesota, third different defensive coordinator under Mario down there in Coral Gables. Up front, Ruben Bain's back. Extremely impressive young man. Akeem Mesidor's back. But it feels like for whatever good vibes there are from Miami fans on the outside, on the edges, the interior seems it's going to come down to a Louisiana Tech transfer in David Blay, and then hoping that Justin Scott kind of takes a big jump into year two. How would you assess what Miami's going to look like up front on defense?
What do you even need me on the show for? You just said the truth. Miami's great on the edge. I mean, great, like as good as I can remember, with Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor and some guys you never heard of at FSU who are going to be stars, man. I mean, I was watching this spring, and I've covered this team since 1997. I know I look like I'm 20 years old, but I'm a little bit older. These guys are as good as anybody I've seen in terms of being freshmen, second-year guys. And I'm talking about Armando Blunt, Hayden Lowe, even Cole McConaughey, who was out this spring. He looked really good last year. They have loaded up at defensive end. But it's like the opposite at tackle. And tackles, they're very difficult to find. In the portal, they're hard to find. In recruiting, they're hard to find. Develop-wise, they're hard to do, right? Because Justin Scott was a 5-star when he signed, but last year he barely played. And now this year they're hoping he can be the guy, but what are you basing that on, right? Because last year, for whatever reason, when their tackle play was okay, but not great, they brought in, C.J. Clark was okay, nothing special. And Simeon Barrow was good, but again, the C.J. Clark spot, they just didn't have much there, and Justin wasn't good enough to play a lot there. So the question is, how much better can he be right now? David Blay was at Louisiana Tech. He was rated highly by these transfer portal ranking systems, whatever. But like this spring, he was nothing special. He's under, to me, I guess he's not technically undersized, but he doesn't play like he's strong. He plays like he's fast and quick. So if he can't hold up against, 325-pound offensive lineman at a much different level, that's going to be a big problem for Miami. And then the other guy there is Ahmad Moten, who is good but not great. And he's a veteran. He's been around 3 years. You can't expect a huge jump up between year 3 and year 4 for a guy who's just been okay and has gotten a lot of chances in terms of backup reps. So defensive tackle is a major question mark. And when Miami fans ask me, and if they're not carrying a gun or a knife or some other weapon, I will tell them the truth, which is that Miami may have problems stopping the run this year. Last year, the Achilles heel was the secondary. and stop in the pass. And that's where Mario spent all his money on defense this year. All the big money went on that to those positions, okay? But now this year, it's going to be the run. And then my guess is in the offseason, they'll spend all the money on the run, and then the secondary will be bad again. Yeah, I'm just joking about that. But that's where they put their money. They put their money at the spot that a year ago was awful. And it would just be a shame if it just turns out that their safety play is bad and their defensive tackle play is bad, because those are the two spots right now where you look at it and you're like, I don't know how good that's going to be.
All right. I have nothing on my pad about linebackers, so I'm not going to steal any of your thunder. What's Miami going to look like at linebacker? I don't think linebacker is a very important position in this day and age, but I'm in the I'm in the wilderness. I mean, I've had to be a little bit nuanced and develop. You can't be horrible there, but I just don't know like how many. When we look at the top 100 prospects in the country every year now, like how many of them are linebackers? How many linebackers are going in the first round of the NFL draft? But I get it. Like you need to know when to trigger, where to trigger, fill your gaps, responsibilities of that. So I do get it. But linebacker, scare Florida State fans with the greatness that you guys have a linebacker.
Yeah. Great job doing your homework. Good job preparing for the interview. Slow clap. So they lost their leading tackler from last year's Francisco Mamanoa, who is Francis Mamanoa's older brother, who they brought in from Washington State. They return who will be a third-year starter now, Wesley Basains. He's good, but he's never really broken out. He has a lot of talent, but he's just never really hit that elite level. And I don't know if it's going to happen at any point now for him. And then this spring, as reporters were watching what we're allowed to watch at practice, which is about an hour of each spring practice, and there were some guys that just jumped off the page, so to speak, to me and to other reporters that I was with. Raul Aguirre, who played a little bit last year as a backup, and then there's a guy named Bobby Pruitt, who also goes by Cam Pruitt. I only know usually it's only felons that have two names that are totally different, but he's not a felon. He just goes by Cam Pruitt and Bobby Pruitt. I haven't asked him why. We have only 3 minutes when we do interviews. We're not going to ask him, hey, how come you got two names? It doesn't make any sense. We don't ask that. But both Cam and Bobby Pruitt played really well. They're one person. This spring, they look great. He looked great. They look great. I don't know how to put it when you have two names. And then they have Jalen Alderman, who started at Louisville 2 years ago. They have Chase Smith, who's been beset by injuries, but physically looks like the best linebacker on the team. So you see all this. But then spring practice ends, and Miami goes out and gets two linebackers, one from Rutgers and one from NC State. The Rutgers guy, Muhammad, started there 2 years ago and was amazing, then missed all last year with an ACL. The guy, Bonner from NC State, started at NC State after the starting middle linebacker got hurt. He was actually an outside linebacker to start the year, moved to middle linebacker, started there as a redshirt freshman, did pretty well, but was going to be a backup again this year to the starter who is now healthy, right, at NC State. So the fact that they added two guys, who I think one of them is certainly going to start, tells me that Miami coaches didn't think that the double-named Pruitt guy, Aguirre, Alderman, Chase Smith, anyone else was really ready to play at a high level. And if that's true, and if now you're relying on a guy who's had two ACL tears, including one that cost him all last year, and another guy who's going to be a backup at NC State, then I'm just saying, and the other guy you're going to start is Wesley Basains, who's never been elite. Linebacker will be okay, but it's hard to say as we sit here right now based on what we saw coaches do after the spring that it's going to be great.
All right, let's go to the secondary. I know Zechariah Poyser from Jacksonville State. I think he was like one of the more coveted guys in the portal. Has he kind of lived up to? And then obviously Jacoby Thomas from Tennessee, Florida State, was involved with him as well in the spring window, but he ends up picking Miami. Safety, cornerback. The strength you said, huh?
Cornerback is stacked, man. I mean, they added, I think, 5 portal guys at corner. They really hit really well there. And Xavier Lucas from Wisconsin.
Oh yeah, that's if the court system doesn't rule him ineligible, Matt.
He's not the one being sued. Okay, he's staying at Miami. He's amazing. I was watching him this spring. He's a star, man. He's going to be an NFL guy. He's really good. You could see why Wisconsin's so upset. And then you got OJ Frederick back on the other side, who had some publications called him an All-American of some kind or other as a freshman. So you got 2 really good corners there. They bring in Keontae Scott from Auburn, transferred to Houston, now transferred here. But Houston, he was just there for like a sip of water in spring practice. So really from Auburn. And he's a guy who was great at nickel 2 years ago. They moved him outside out to boundary corner last year, and he was terrible. And now Miami's going to use him back at nickel. So I think he'll be good too. So I think the cornerback position is just loaded. And then they got Ethan O'Connor, who started at Washington State. They've got other guys back. Jadaeus Richards started here 6 games last year, big physical corner. Like, their cornerback situation is as good as any in the ACC that I see. Safety, though, Poyser looked great this spring. So it's easy to sit here and say, oh, he's going to be amazing. But I've seen guys look great in the spring that are terrible during the season, okay? So he played at Jacksonville State. He started as a redshirt freshman there. Different level of competition, right? So it's to be determined for me with him, okay? I think he can be really good, but to be determined. And then the other safety, Jacoby Thomas, the guy went to Tennessee as a transfer from a low-level program, couldn't even start or play much at Tennessee, wasn't good enough. And now he's starting at Miami. So to me, anytime I see a guy who goes to a major program for a minor program, can't break in the lineup and transfers again, I'm going to call that a red flag. I don't know how you guys do it at FSU. Maybe at FSU, that's like a star because you take 30 or 40 transfers a year. I don't know. Maybe that's great.
That's taking a bunch of transfer this time too. That's with the CJ Daniels thing. I'm glad you really didn't try to pump him up too much because he was at, I don't know where, Liberty maybe, then he went to LSU and then could not replicate his success there. So it is always tricky to rely on guys moving up in levels, but it happens. It happens a lot of times.
And then there's no depth at safety either, by the way. But that's it. It's safety, defensive tackle are the big problems. Linebacker will be okay, not great. Cornerback's going to be elite. Defensive ends are elite. That's the headline right there. You could just skip. You should tell people in the beginning, put a little thing. Hey, skip to minute 20. Skip to the 20-minute mark if you don't want to hear all the nonsense about the defensive backs. That's the summary. Actually, about the whole defense. Sorry, about the whole defense. Just skip to minute 20.
All right, the Borregala is no longer over the program down to you, but Bert Auburn from Texas was brought in so that they've addressed that. On the way out here, Matt, just what is the temperature like down there when it comes to Mario and the I don't want to say excitement, but just we've had the conversation on the podcast, like who's got the most pressure on them in the state of Florida going this year? Is Mike's seat the hottest? Napier's seat the hottest? Is it Mario's? And I don't know. I didn't think that I would figure that Miami realized just how down they'd been and just to kind of give Mario, if it's not going to be Mario that's going to get them back to prominence, who could it possibly be? But I don't know if that's really the sentiment down there. What is the sentiment around Mario, this program this year, especially with the way things ended last year?
Yeah, well, I agree with you with that sentiment. I mean, Mario's got a 10-year contract, but you know how fans are. It's what have you done for me lately? And we've seen with Randy Shannon, with Al Golden, with Manny Diaz, they had similar records to Mario Cristobal through 3 years. Okay, that's a fact. None of them made it past year 4. Not one of those 3 coaches. Okay, so to me, year 4 is a massive season for Mario Cristobal and the Miami Hurricanes. This is his roster for the first time, fully his roster except for 2 guys, Ryan Rodriguez and Chase Smith, who I mentioned already. That's it. Every other guy he brought in here. So if Miami has a bad season, which would be 5 or 6 wins, 7 wins. Like they have to get 10 wins in the playoffs or fans won't be happy. But if they get anything below 8 wins, it's a disaster. Okay. A total disaster. And this is it. Like we're going to find out this year where we're going, because if they have a good year this year, it's just going to keep going up because his recruiting is stellar. And I think his development piece will come to play. We haven't really seen it yet because he's used so many transfers like what you guys do. And when you take so many transfers, it's hard to see what you actually have in recruiting because those guys don't see the field for a ton of reps against really good competition usually. So that's to be determined. But if you look at all the really good programs, aside from Oregon, the top 10 programs aside from Oregon, they're taking 5 to 10 transfers on average a year, not 20 like what Miami's doing, not 25 like what Florida State's doing, And so from my perspective, if I want Miami to be good, which I like to cover a good team, I'm hoping starting in 2026, they don't need and will not take as many transfers and let this process of recruit, develop, fill in these few holes that come about with top transfer guys, and you're done into eternity, winning championships every year. Miami versus Florida State every year for the national championship. That's what we need.
Sounds beautiful. Then you find yourself in year 6, still going to the transfer portal, trying to figure things out. We'll see how it all goes. Matt Shodell from Canesport. Thanks so much for the time and the knowledge, Matt. We appreciate you doing this.
Sure thing.
All right, that's it. That's a wrap for today's show. These will not be nearly as long as maybe some would hope, but hey, it's better than nothing, right? If you want long shows, how about 3 hours of Florida State talk with Jeff Cameron and Tom Lang? It's the Jeff Cameron Show, 1 to 4 p.m. Check that out. Tuesday, Seminole Headlines, 1 to 3 p.m. Maybe a bonus hour? Maybe? And warchant.com there for you all the time. So, again, check out warchant.com, see what's going on over on the Twitter machine from the Warchant account. I think it's going to probably be a quiet week while I'm gone, but now that I said that, who knows? Who knows? Anyhow, 2 more shows coming your way. Unfortunately, it's mostly me yapping, but Wednesday show, it's all Corey Clark. Hell yes. Thanks for listening, everybody. It's been Wake Up Warchant presented by Vitamin Energy, vitaminenergy.com.